Hi everyone, it's Nicole here for Simon Says Stamp with a Rainbow Nordic Village featuring the Sugar Pea Designs exclusive limited edition stamp set for Stamptember 2019 called Nordic Village. I thought it would be super fun to create an all-over background with rows of these cute houses, trees, and church, as well as little hearts coming through or coming up from chimneys and a snowy background and some greetings. But the little kicker is I wanted it all to be in rainbow to be really bright and colorful. It's important when creating an all-over design like this that still implements a sentiment to kind of gauge where you all want that to go first, especially the sentiment, and then go ahead and build around that. So while the sentiment is part of the second row of buildings and houses, I guess I should say, I still need to make that prominent. And so that was really my ultimate goal when starting the card. So that's what you're seeing here, is kind of laying out some of the images from the set and figuring out where I want it to go. I went ahead and stamped my first row, including trees. So some of the trees are outlines and some are solid. And because of that, and I didn't want to stamp the solid trees in black because I really thought that would take away from the rainbow feel of my design, I am going to stamp the outline trees in black, but the solid trees are going to be stamped with a solid ink color. Also important is some overlap, so some masking is really awesome because I think that really makes the scene more natural. I did not want to create masks. You guys probably know this about me. I've mentioned it many times. If you follow me already, you know that masking is generally not my favorite thing. There are always those cards where I go masking crazy, but that is few and far between. So if I'm doing a card like this is a lot of stamping. I really try to just kind of wing it. So I used Post-it tape and did my best. I did not worry too much about it, but I'm building that whole first row. Plus now I stamped my sentiment because that is the primary focus. And then I'm simply stamping and layering the trees and the houses all along that top border. The green inks I'm using are from the Stamp Market. I am loving these new inks from the Stamp Market. These are available at Simon Says Stamp. The two green colors I'm using are called Leafy and Cactus. So more of that kind of pine tree looking line tree is the cactus, and then the solid trees there are leafy. And then from the chimney, I have some little red hearts. This is Cherry Kisses, one of my all-time favorite, the Stamp Market inks. I love this color of red. I'm kind of funny about my reds, and a lot of them tend to be real dark or too pink. And this is a true, I kind of call it my Christmas red. It is a nice bright red. I love it. Another really great red that's a favorite in my collection is the Lawn Fawn Lobster red. So those are really my two favorite true reds, in case anybody was wondering. I am also building my second row. Now I purposely picked a church and a house image and then trees that are framing up the sentiment. So you'll see that I stamped the sentiment first. We stamped the church because the spire on the church really works great to help frame up warm winter wishes. And then I'm putting trees underneath so it leaves a nice open space so it's nothing too tall. And then a taller house with hearts coming out of the chimney on the left. Then we're going to build some trees around it. Now I did flip my panel around quite a bit while working on this, simply just to whatever would work the best as far as, because that tree was too close to the edge. So I flipped my panel around so it could lay off the edge just a little bit. I also am using the Misty ruler to help line up my buildings. That was just to get them as straight as possible. Also using the grid on the Misty cover. I highly, highly recommend using a stamp positioner for this step. For stamping your background, it makes the process so much easier than trying to just stamp them individually because this is a lot of stamping. You get to the end and you mess up down near the bottom row, you are going to be mad, and the chances of going back and redoing this are going to be slim to none. I really highly recommend a stamp positioner like the Misty because it makes this card so easy to create. So kind of getting down to these bottom 2 rows, and of course that bottom row is hanging off the edge, I went ahead and stamped those, and then I went in and filled in the trees. There's no rhyme or reason. It just kind of worked the best for me, and I really had to be conscious and aware of not stamping the trees so they look like they're taller than the house. We still want to keep them so that it's the same, as the rest of the card panel. I really want this to look like a trimmed down patterned paper that simply has a sentiment in it, is basically what we're creating with this all over pattern. One thing I did notice, and I want to mention it because I did not film this part, is so at the top, I did not start off the top of my paper, and then on especially the left side, I think, I'm not really stamping off that side quite as much either. So I felt like it looked a little wonky. What I did to correct this is I trimmed down my background panel to 4 by 5¼ inches. That's going to leave a thin white border all the way around when I adhere this to a white top fold card base. So in the finished card, if you notice that it looks a little different, that's where that comes from. However, I did totally wait to do that step until I was done coloring. Oftentimes, if I know something's a little off, I knew it was a little off when I finished stamping, but I just went ahead and waited until I was done coloring to gauge how to trim it down because it was very important to keep Warm Winter Wishes. How about Warm Winter Wishes, not witches? It's not a Halloween card. Sorry, guys. Warm Winter Wishes centered. And so I made sure I trimmed off an equal amount from the 2 sides as well as the top and the bottom. I did trim a little more off the top simply because I had more room to trim off there. So I am coloring everything in with Copic markers. I stamped all of this stuff on, or all these images on Neenah Smooth White cardstock. One thing I thought was important as well was the solid stamped trees. So anything stamped in the green there, the tree trunk is that green outline, which I didn't totally love. So I simply took my Copics and colored in the trunk and the branches to make it, flow a little bit better in my scene. I have listed the colors of Copic markers I'm using across the bottom of the screen. You can also see on my table the rainbow of colors we're using. I purposely grabbed all my markers right off the bat and then colored. And I started in the top row and I'm going to work my way down. I didn't start at the left side, however. I guess I started with the house that spoke to me the most, and then I simply filled in from there. You'll also notice that I do turn my paper a lot. I lay my hand down when I color. I lay my hand down when I write too. It's something that I did when I was little and just never really corrected. And so because that's more natural and comfortable for me, and I've kind of gotten the habit, because even though Copic markers are alcohol markers and they dry quickly and they're not going to smear, I will often use water-based markers like Ziggs or even colored pencils. And if I put my hand in that and move it and smear my card, I'm always so upset. So I kind of got in the habit where I just flip and turn my card as I'm coloring to try to keep my hand out of the ink as much as possible. Another thing I did want to mention, the black ink I use to stamp everything here is the new Hero Arts Intensified black ink. If you are looking for a great ink that's very bold black, I highly recommend this ink. I think it is phenomenal. It works with Copic coloring, which is so exciting, and does not smear at all and just stamps a really, really nice outline. I absolutely love it. You will notice that the outline for these buildings is a pretty fine line, really, and it just stamps them beautifully. There's not any smudging, and the roofs that are all black look black. Really, really love this ink. So we're going to continue to build this. As I'm coloring, I did think to myself, the white background is really, really white. But where it's an all over pattern, I didn't necessarily want to color around everything with additional markers, and I didn't want to color over my solid stamped trees. I knew that that would be kind of an iffy situation and might not work very well for certain aspects of the design. It might smear that ink. That ink is not an alcohol ink safe ink. And so I tried to think of something else I could do to fill in those open spaces. And what I ultimately decided was to take my two lightest blue-green markers, those great aqua markers, and we will be adding some dot detail all over the background to resemble falling snow. So that's always a great option if you're looking for a way to add a little bit of color to a background but not color it all in, or mask everything off and ink it, which, as I previously mentioned, this is a lot of masking. I do want to tell you that I believe, as of the time of this video, that you can still get the stamp die combo for this. So if you're looking for coordinating dies and you want to create all kinds of scenes and be able to die cut these, go ahead and pick that up as well. And I will have that linked in the supplies below this video. I love seeing the houses come together. I did have the lights on in all of my houses, so lots of little yellow there in all the windows. That is where the yellow in my rainbow really comes into play. I didn't color in any of the houses yellow because I wanted all the windows to be yellow. Same thing with the green. Because there's a lot of green in the trees, green is used as an accent, like on the roof of this house, but it's not really used for a house base itself. Now this is my favorite house, and that's probably kind of funny, but it's the littlest house, but my favorite thing about it, and I'm going to zoom in because I wanted you to see, is the little rainbow striped roof. Isn't that cute and fun? I kind of want to create all of these houses now with little rainbow roofs. I think maybe even getting little tags and stamping just this little guy on it and making gift tags would be lots of fun. Love, love, love that little house with the rainbow roof. So we have just a few more houses here to color in. I went ahead and did not repeat the colors across the bottom of the screen because I am using all the same color combinations that you just saw, and I didn't want to cover up the coloring, so I went ahead and left that off. But if you saw a color combination earlier that you liked, just know that I am using the same things here. And I do notice that in the row right above this, I missed coloring in the trunk of the tree. I will go in and correct that before I photograph and finish this card. So just a tiny bit more coloring. Another thing I did add later on, and I'm not sure that I caught it in the video, is I tried to have hearts coming out of a chimney in each row of my card. And I noticed that I had not done that in the bottom row. So this last house here, this purple house with the red roof I'm coloring, I did go in and stamp some red hearts coming out of that chimney to even it out. That gives me little hearts in all 4 rows on this background. Now I'm taking my markers and adding that dot detail. So this is what I was talking about a little bit ago. I'm using my lighter color first, BG11, and we're just going and adding lots and lots of little dots. This is definitely the more concentrated color. The lighter the color, I wanted to add many, many snowy little dots all over my background, and then we'll take BG13 and add just a tiny bit more in. And I went ahead and colored in that tree trunk. I did not want to forget to do that. And then we're going to add a few darker ones scattered here and there, but quite a few less of the darker color. And there's our background. So cute. And I did add those hearts in on camera. I couldn't remember if I did or not. So there's those last hearts as well. So now I did trim down my background, and I am taking a scrap of Hero Hues Cherry cardstock. I'm going to use my powder tool on it first, and we're going to use the phrase from the Nordic Village stamp set called From Our Home to Yours. We are going to stamp that with clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder before trimming into a thin strip that we can then adhere to our card with foam adhesive. So while this is a one-layer background, everything else on this card is completely stamped and one layer. This little phrase will give us a little bit of depth and dimension. I love the addition of little strips to my cards. This is going to overlap the church and trees and one of the houses here, but it's still not going to take away from the overall look and feel of the card design. It's a super thin, teeny tiny little strip. Now, because we used a powder tool, make sure and wipe away that excess powder once your embossing powder is all the way dry so that you don't have a chalkboard looking effect there. These little foam adhesive strips are my absolute favorite. They're perfect for little text strips on cards, sentiment strips on cards. We are going to just center that, pop that in place, and then our final thing we're going to do is take Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard, and we are going to scatter these all over. So in addition to our Copic marker snowy background, we're going to have little touches of sparkle all over our card design, which really gives, a nice Christmassy feel. I even added some of these over the tops of the houses and the trees, just here and there, tiny little drops. I tried not to make any of them too terrible big, but what's awesome is when this dries and you kind of tip it, there is nice little glittery snow all over the card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Rainbow Nordic Village card featuring the Sugar Pea Designs Stamp Timber Stamp Set for Simon Says Stamp. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Stamp Timber exclusives that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a new card making video. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.